when you run a business that you are really passionate about, to be able to step away from that. And that's something that I have struggled with since the beginning. But I think I do access some other podcasts and things to help me learn about different ways that you can be able to step away and not overload yourself, because passion is a wonderful thing, but it can also be to your own detriment, especially in a service-based business where we work with vulnerable populations, we work with families that have a lot of difficulties, and you just want to give and give and give. But I think one thing that I've really learnt over the years is you actually can't just keep giving everything to the business and everything to your clients, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to do everything in the business, but you're still a clinician and you're seeing clients, unfortunately, then that kind of affects the clients. And that was something that I realized last year when I was in a session with a client, because I'm still a clinician working as a speechy as well. And sometimes everything going on in the business world, then you can't switch your head into, I'm just here with this client now. So I think having boundaries and being able to separate those days, I suppose, where you're working on the business and then you're working in the business is something that's I have found really important this year going into it, having days that are working on the business days.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Healthy Business Lab podcast, where we interview awesome allied health business owners to get their experiences, their expertise, and their experiments. Today on the podcast, we've got the amazing Hermione Chettle from House of Speech joining us. Welcome to the podcast, Hermione.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Again, as we always like to do, is rather than put a big spiel about our guests, we love the guests to introduce themselves and their background in the allied health space. And I'd love for you to share a little bit with our listeners as to your background.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Hermione. My business is House of Speech, and House of Speech was born in 2023 after I actually started not as an allied health professional. I used to be a teacher and experienced speech pathology in that setting and thought, wow, that's for me. I became a speechy a few years ago and I worked within a private practice myself, and then, started House of Speech to really try and bridge a gap between professional knowledge and educator knowledge and upskill parents and have quite a holistic approach to speech intervention. So we work within, on the Gold Coast, we've got one clinic in Currumbin, and then we also do a lot of rural practice. So my other clinic is out in Kingaroy, and we work very closely with therapy assistants who we train and upskill to help us deliver that intervention in a rural area. So we're not just delivering telehealth, we've got someone there on the ground to kind of help deliver that, because telehealth comes with a lot of barriers, but trying to remove as many barriers as we can for those children that live in more rural areas so that they can have access to support, because there are so many support needs out there and they're very underserviced areas. So that is my big passion area and kind of why House of Speech started in the beginning.
Yeah. I love that background, as well as being relatively new to allied health in many ways, and the experience that brings, having a different perspective on things, which I know I'm excited to get to the experiments that you've done, and you've already touched upon a few of those there, given the rural aspect and your approach with your assistants and the like. So we'll dig into that. But I guess coming back to the business owners, often we don't look after ourselves in certain ways in managing our businesses. And from a background of health education, what's one of these sort of little key takeaways from what you've learned over the years that you tap into all the learnings that you've had in the areas, guessing around especially communication piece of what do you try to remind yourself to tap into from all that learning that helps you in the business ownership space?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm still trying to master. It is very hard, I think, when you run a business that you are really passionate about, to be able to like step away from that. And that's something that I have struggled with since the beginning. But I think I do access some other like podcasts and things to help me learn about different ways that you can be able to step away and not overload yourself, because passion is a wonderful thing, but it can also be to your own detriment, especially in a service-based business where we work with vulnerable populations, we work with families that have a lot of difficulties, and you just want to give and give and give. But I think one thing that I've really learnt over the years is you actually can't just keep giving everything to the business and everything to your clients, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to do everything in the business, but you're still a clinician and you're seeing clients, unfortunately, then that kind of affects the clients. And that was something that I realized last year when I was in a session with a client, because I'm still a clinician working as a speechie as well. And sometimes like everything going on in the business world, then you can't switch your head into, I'm just here with this client now. So I think like having boundaries and being able to separate those days, I suppose, where you're working on the business and then you're working in the business is something that's like I have found really important this year going into it, having days that are working on the business days, and that might be content, that might be supporting our other professionals, and then I have a day that I am just seeing my clients, and that is my focus for the day. So that has been something that's really helped me, because you have so many ideas, you want to do so many things, but trying to go between everything and do it all doesn't really work. You end up, I end up in a bit of a chaotic mess. So
love that reminder as we're early-ish in a new year. It's such a good reminder. And I think one of our guests last year, Alex Hibb, was talking about having that toy box. Yeah, you were just talking about all the ideas. That's the thing that stuck out of me, and having the boundaries. Like, okay, that goes to the toy box. There's my boundaries, because now I need to be doing what I'd set aside to be doing. And again, I love that approach to going, hey, clear headspace. Where am I? What am I doing? What's the focus and attention on?
Yeah, which is a challenge. It's definitely a mental challenge, particularly if you're like a real like ideas person. And I think like it comes back to that passion. Like sometimes you just can't push passion down, and it's really hard to manage it, because I have that problem. I'll be like, I don't know, going for a walk on the weekend and I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. But now I have a list, and it's an ideas list. And the ideas have to go in there and be parked for a little while, because otherwise you then try to do everything and nothing actually gets done. Yeah.
So good. I think we're very similar there. You can see why we enjoyed our first initial chat before this podcast as well. So, and even that, talking to this idea of being a business owner and doing experiments in business, no doubt you've experimented with approaches for that, the parking lot, toy box, ideas, list and the like. But I'd love to sort of dig into some of the other aspects that as you started your own practice and experiments that you've got about and things that you've implemented that have worked, haven't worked, or you've evolved and refined, especially with you. Again, you've got the multiple practices there, and you touched upon the way your team operates as well. I think it's a very unique approach that you've got.
Yeah, I think probably definitely the way our team operates. But I think also one thing, because, you know, I haven't been a speechie for a lot of years, and I know that starting and working for yourself in allied health is a lot more accessible, I suppose, as well, with being able to be a sole trader through NDIS. And I think sometimes also one thing that I've experienced being a bit younger is that you've got to have a certain amount of years experience as a clinician. But I do think like you can still, I wouldn't ever recommend it to a new grad, but that was something I experimented with a little bit in the beginning as well. And like, yes, I was an early professional going out on my own, but if you put the supports in place and you have a mentor and you access that support consistently, there's no reason that you can't do that. So I don't want to turn anyone off from that, because I think it's so valuable, because the people that want to do that from an early age or from early in their career are often going to be the ones that will likely have the most impact, because it's always going to be coming from an area of passion, or they'll have some great idea that doesn't already exist. So I think that's just something that I've experienced a little bit being younger in the workforce and being a younger business owner as well, that I wanted to touch on. But I think overall, like, as I said before, being able to provide a service in a rural area is so important to me. And that is something that has definitely evolved over time. And I think when I started, our practice is out in Kingaroy. When I started out there, I was only for 2 months. I worked at my mum's house. In the front of her house, there's a little sunroom, and I turned that into a clinic. And I did that for 2 months. I was full. I could not see any more kids. And there were so many barriers to that. I had kids running through the house some sessions, and like it was chaos. I was like, I need a space for this. And so then I got to max capacity very quickly, but then there's a need. There's such a need out there. So I wanted to get other professionals on board, and trying to hire qualified professionals in a rural area is so frustrating. Really, it's really hard. Like, it's hard to get people to go there. It's an underserviced area. So I thought, what can I do to still be able to provide a service to more kids? And that was by starting having therapy assistants working alongside us. And I've worked with therapy assistants when I worked in another private practice as well, but I always felt that like the therapy assistants that I worked with were so motivated, and I think the qualification and the learning that they get from TAFE degree or like a diploma isn't sufficient for what they actually need to go into the workforce and do. So we employed some therapy assistants, and our model is kind of hybrid between working with us as a speechie and a therapy assistant. So all of our therapy assistants have their own caseload of clients, and they have supervising speechies for different clients. And we do a joint session with them every fortnight. That might vary for some clients. We do a joint session every fortnight, and then we write them very specific therapy plans so that then they can fulfill the therapy when we're not there, because I'm not always out in Kingaroy. And that has taken a lot of time to get to that. It's taken, unfortunately, some staff as well that didn't work, because again, comes back to the passion. And when you have a serious passion and a really significant mission, you want to make sure that people align with that. And that can be really hard, because no one is ever really going to care about your business the way that you care about it. But I think now we are so fortunate with the staff that we've got, and we put a lot of time into upskilling them. All of our therapy assistants have their own professional development budget, and they're not like, that's something that you would get if you're a speechy OT, like wherever you go. And like, yes, that's a cost for me as a business owner, and that like takes away from your profits, but it's just something that is so worthwhile doing, because at the end of the day, these are the people that are there working with these clients on the floor, delivering that intervention. So yeah, it's taken us a lot. Like with that, we used to plan for them to do a block of 10 sessions and then review it at the end, but that didn't work because kids change so much. You can't just be like, oh, they'll still be working on these goals in 10 sessions because one of them might achieve them quicker. And the therapy assistants don't have the skills to kind of step up and step down. So that's where we come in to support. So yeah, it's taken a lot of back and forth, but I think like at the moment, it's working really well for us, and it's providing access to services that people would otherwise just go without in that area.
It's so good. And what I love about what you've just shared, it's kind of like it's one big experiment, but there's just countless mini experiments happening along the way through the whole process, which again just comes back from you identify a pretty glaring, obvious problem with, hey, what you want to achieve in rural areas, key problem, hiring qualified people to deliver the outcomes that we want to get. There's a gap here, there's a mismatch. What can we actually do about that? And again, going back to that simplicity of identifying, well, what's the problem? What are we trying to achieve? Well, again, what's the different processes we can go about, and working into your therapy assistants, which as you always, whichever profession we've gone into straight out of learning, whether it's school, whether it's apprenticeships, whether it's TAFE or uni or whatever, it's like there's always this massive gap, isn't there, between, hey, whatever that learning was to this is the real life. You know, for people to get that experience, and I know my experience of going through, it's like, well, with good employees and good team bases, like you learn so much in that process.
Yeah, so much.
And so I guess if I was to sort of dig into that area of that sort of initial training and sort of building that part of the model out and the training for your team, what was that process like? And what were those sort of iterations like? back when you first sort of played with this kind of new approach and a different idea, how quickly did you sort of the train and the iterations of and the different versions of what that looked like for you?
It was probably like, I suppose our model with like now that we kind of do a fortnightly check-in, I feel like that model was probably over like a year of trialing. Like at the beginning, it was the block of 10 sessions that we'd planned for them. Then we thought that's not really working. They need more reviews. Then we would like when I then got another speechy full-time here, that allowed me to kind of have that back and forth of like, okay, you support this therapy assistant with these clients. I can support this one with these ones. And then, yeah, it was probably over because I mean, House of Speech is still pretty young. Like I started in my mum's sunroom in October 2023.
Oh, you said, yeah.
Yeah, it's evolved a lot in that time as well. But I think like then in relation to the training that we decide on for our therapy assistants, it is absolutely dependent on client need. I feel like we do things a little bit different with like, we modify so much therapy to be within our client's interests. We make our own resources for a lot of stuff because that helps us with engagement. So I think like then when we decide on what our therapy assistants need training on, it's looking at their caseload and let's say quite a few of our children are autistic children who use alternative communication devices. So they have a weekly supervision session on top of that with a speech pathologist where they just get to ask whatever questions. What's been hard? What's not working? What would you like to learn more about? So maybe one week they want to dive into their alternative communication. So we will do like an in-house kind of masterclass on alternative communication because then they're taking that learning and then they can apply it to like 5 clients that they see. And yes, it's going to vary in their therapy sessions, like how they deliver that based on the client's needs. But all of our training and their PD that they go and do needs to be relevant to their client base. So it's seeing what clienteles they're working with and how can we still get like, I suppose, a bit of bang for buck when that is an added expense. Like I've never worked in a clinic where I've known a therapy assistant to get a PD budget. So like, and I've worked with therapy assistants before and they are in most rural places, but I think they're so underutilized and they can be a wonderful resource if we like train them. And most of them are motivated to learn, like they want more responsibility. And when you give them that more responsibility, they want to learn more because they just feel autonomous. So that's been really lovely to watch. But yeah, it's really dependent on their needs, on their skills. Like we've got one that's more experienced than another. So we are having to like, since hiring a new person at the moment, we've kind of got to step that back and think, oh, okay, I've been writing therapy plans for this one that's very experienced. I might need to add a bit more detail in here. So it's really scaffolded dependent on who that therapy assistant is.
Again, number one, I appreciate you sharing it in the context of time because yes, you're still very young in terms of the business age, but that concept, a lot of businesses will do an experiment, but they don't necessarily let it run for enough to get enough feedback to go, oh, how quickly or not. And again, there are some experiments that you do need to nip in the bud, but it's also that notion of giving time for the feedback loops to actually play out a little bit. And I think that was really nice to share. I think some people kind of go, the experiment didn't work. And so I tend to find that 12 months is quite often a nice solid time to have an idea. Here's what it looked like. There's probably 5 different mini tweaks that might happen throughout that time. I think that's a really useful thing that you
And I think that feedback is super, like I'm not the only one that makes these decisions and I make sure that the team is very involved in it and I make sure that the therapy assistants are. Like I will say, what do you think is working about this model? What's not working about this model? And that was when it came up, like with the 10 sessions, one of them said, I think they're changing more than what we anticipate in the plan, like reviewing them sooner so that I know I'm on the right track. So I get them involved in that too, because they're the ones delivering the intervention and it's got to work for them as much as the clients. And the parents are involved in this too. Like our parents know our model. They know why we use that model and they're involved in that too.
Yeah, cool. And so on that idea of, I guess, feedback, I'm curious as to how you've either sought out the feedback or how you've noticed things to get the feedback. Has that changed in the 12, 18 months as well?
Yes, definitely. So that's actually something that towards the end of last year and this year we've refined again. I mentioned before, like every week, each therapy assistant has a supervision session, which is the exact same as a qualified clinician. You would have like your mentoring session. We have those sessions with them. And within that now we have employed a particular framework, which is more, I suppose that one is a little bit of feedback around the model, but it more is helping them kind of get into this critical thinking of like, if they have a question to bring to us, we're using a model now of like, they need to define their question in their supervision document and talk about what have they tried already? What prior experience can they draw on? Do they have a similar client that's presented like this that they can draw on that experience? And then what do you want from your supervising speechy? Do you want them to just give you the answer? Because sometimes we do want that. Sometimes you're at capacity and you're like, I don't want to figure it out. Just figure it out for me. Like
Capacity.
Yeah, I wish I could do that most days. So then
I'll just jump in there, but it's also, you're not assuming anything each time. And that could change from week to week. It's like, actually, no, I want this. You're not making assumptions as a part of that process of building that in. I love it. That's super cool.
Yeah.
It's part of being a manager or a leader of not making assumptions, which I know I fall in the trap of quite a bit. So you put a framework in place that not stops, but sort of limits the potential of getting caught in that way of thinking. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, totally. And just having them think about that as well themselves is kind of like developing their problem solving skills too. But beyond that, I think probably one other thing that's changed for us a lot is note taking. So after each session, they need to do their progress notes. And that is something that in the beginning, we do need to give them a lot of support in what to put in there, because that information isn't only like legally we need to do it, but for us then, if we're not in the session, we need to be able to look at those notes and realize what was going on, like what were the client's outcomes, like what challenges did they have. So we've really refined our note templates so that everything is templated for them. And they know that if they're working with a kid for speech accuracy, they need to be recording the accuracy. And we have trained them in that. If they're working with a kid that is doing early language development or learning how to use their alternative communication device, if they use that at any point in the session, I want to know what have they said. And then we do like voice recordings as well. So they might just video their session and we can watch. And then at the end of that note as well, there's a little option for them to say like, yes, needs a review ASAP, or I need to talk about this client in supervision. So it just helps them like keep a track of that. It helps us realize maybe if they're always saying, I need to talk about this client in supervision, then maybe we need to dive into a bit more about why and what could we do to run a little workshop with them all to upskill them in particularly like regulation is a huge one that always comes up for us. So then we will do like some support for them on how to co-regulate. What can you do in that moment when this kid's running around the room, tearing the place apart? How can we stop and pause and like ground? And I suppose within that as well, like when I'm out in Kingaroy, any session that I do, I then do joint sessions with the therapy assistant so they can watch me deliver the exact intervention that I want them to deliver. And then we gradually release that responsibility.
Yeah, cool. And absolutely love a good system and a good template. But again, even from what you've just shared there, the idea that no doubt that had many iterations and it was coming back to that point of what do I actually want to know? What do I need to keep on coming back to can help them design, which as with a lot of these things, if we improve the design, the outcomes naturally flow off the back of that. And I'm hearing that very beneficial process from what you've just shared there. Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely. But a difficult process because I think like when you're a clinician yourself and you've done all of this, it can be frustrating to kind of have to take a step back, and it takes time to make a new note template and it takes time to train people and things like that. So it's definitely hard to get yourself into that mindset. But I think now seeing some of the outcomes from that is really beneficial.
Yeah, cool. There's so much there that I could delve deeper on and want to unpack even more, but I am conscious of time. We do keep these.
I'm a speechy. I could yap all day.
No. But what I love is, again, we have had people on these calls and done multiple sessions. So a few areas we can delve deeper and feedback from our listeners as well as to what they want to hear, get Hermione back for another session. But one thing that we also love to round out our chats with here in these experiments, and I can already picture some of the transformations that you've had for your clientele and even your team members. I'm sure these loads of transformations. Yeah, I'd love for you just to give an example of, what you've seen and what you've managed to achieve in the short time that you've been in business.
Yes, so much. It honestly I feel like sometimes I look back and go, holy heck, so much happened in like such a short period of time. Like, I think just being able to go from having a home office to a clinic and to 2 clinics and 5 staff members with I didn't get any kind of funding to do anything. I didn't get any loans or anything. So I think seeing then, the impact that is bringing to a lot of families. And I think overall, probably just seeing the name and reputation that we are developing is something that I love so much. Out in Kingaroy, everyone knows us so well. They know my dog because he's a therapy dog. And I think seeing how you can provide that service to people that would otherwise go without is kind of the reason why we're doing this, right? Seeing those outcomes and being able to support a family, also supporting families where sometimes you feel like it's out of scope. That is kind of the biggest thing for me that helps me sleep at night. I just love the fact that we can provide a service somewhere that people would go without, and it's a whole little community for us. And that's the biggest thing for me with House of Speech is we are not about come and drop your kid off for 45 minutes and we fix their speech kind of thing. And I think that is a massive misconception in the work that we do, that you're not going to get the outcomes you want if that's the approach. So we are about creating a community and having that family feel. And I think that has been the most rewarding thing for me to see flourish. And I think in the times that I get so stressed and worried about everything, coming back to that and coming back to my mission and pausing and being no, it is coming. The steps are in place and that's coming to real life. I think overall the whole thing has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but also the most rewarding for all of those reasons. Yeah.
When you were talking in the first part of sharing the part about transformation, the first sort of the phrase that came to my mind was community transformation. And then you use the word and then you continue to elaborate on that. So thank you for elaborating on your version of that, because that's what I'm sensing and feeling from what you've created. And again, your approach of what you've shared in the different experiments is that it's actually created this whole transformation in the community around the value of the therapy and the people that are involved. It's more than even just the therapy is, and coming back from speech and communication and those sorts of things. I literally see the ripple effects of that taking place in the rural communities that we can see that you are so passionate about.
Yeah, totally. We are starting working a lot more with other professionals in the area too, and upskilling childcare educators is a huge area of my passion because they are with those children all day, every day. And the unfortunate truth sometimes in those rural areas is that childcare setting, they might be there from early morning till evening, and that is kind of their home. So being able to get in and support those educators as well is something that we're doing at the moment, particularly in the South Burnett. So that is really rewarding and nice to recognize those professionals as well, because they do the hard work. I see these kids 45 minutes a week. We're never going to get anywhere with just that. It's got to be a community approach.
And I love that. That is a nice little segue into, I think, another episode with the experiments in the cross collaboration. And we have talked about that on this podcast with a few of our guests of the modalities / education alike, because I know us ourselves, we access therapists, and you're exactly right. The ability for whoever, whether it's the teachers, whether it's the early childhood educators, of the whole team that comes around our little ones to be able to do that. So I think I would love to have you back to unpack the experiments around the cross modality collaborations.
There's definitely been some experiments there and some interesting conversations that I've had to have. Yeah.
There'll be a lot of stuff that I think people can learn from approaches that have worked or different just ways of looking at it, which again, it's a specific aspect of this podcast. Listeners, let me know if that's something you want to hear more. We might even do a special series on cross-modality deeper dives. So we've done a few episodes in the past year about that, but we might even go a bit deeper on that as well. So again, really appreciate your time and your shares, Hermione. There's a whole lot of takeaways that I'm going to reflect back on this conversation, but what we want here and a part of this podcast is to see amazing professionals building sustainable, amazing practices so that you can serve more and more clients, serve the community and the teams as well. There's just so many ripple effects that this can have. And your experiments are proof. There's stuff that works, there's stuff that doesn't work, but we can learn, evolve, and that way we can have more impact. So once again, I appreciate you sharing your story today.
No, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. I haven't, then sometimes when you just like, you think back on it and you're like, oh, wow, there's a lot that's happened there.
Yeah. So yes, take a pat on the back for yourself. You're doing awesome work. I mean, love to all stay in touch. And for all the listeners out here that do want to connect, to follow you what you do, network, or potentially reach out and network, where is the best space or places to find and connect with you?
Yeah, cool. So our website is just houseofspeech.com.au and our email's on there. We've just got like an admin email. You could also just fill out like an inquiry form on there. If you know any professionals accessing services, you can just reach out via that. And just on Instagram, it's just House of Speech with an underscore. So you can always just message us on there.
Awesome. As always, we'll include those links in the show notes too. This episode, and highly recommend following along what Hermione and the team are doing there at House of Speech. Once again, thank you for your time, and that's a wrap here from the Healthy Business Lab podcast, and really excited to be sharing more amazing stories like this one today. Over and out from us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Healthy Business Lab podcast. Make sure you subscribe to keep up to date with all the latest episodes.